Hey guys, it's me, Beverly here, just letting you know a little bit about this episode. Today I'm interviewing Becca Williams. She is an emotions therapist and a psychedelic plant medicine guide. That's right, you heard me right, a psychedelic plant medicine guide. Want to know what that is? Are we talking about cannabis? Are we talking about shrooms? Maybe we're talking about both. Either way, open your mind, open your ears, and get ready to listen how to get rid of blocks and work on your emotions. Enjoy. Hey guys. Okay, let's get real. Do you sometimes feel like life's just a never ending loop of wake up, drink coffee, go to work, waste countless hours scrolling online, eat, watch TV, maybe read a book, sleep, and then repeat? Have you ever really thought, is this really it? Guess what? You're not the only one. I help people just like you, well, and me, to get unstuck. I'm bringing on amazing guests who will inspire you, challenge you, and maybe even blow your mind. Let's face it, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got. But lucky for you, I know exactly how to help. With a little bit of woo and a whole lot of you, it's time to unstick your stuck and shake that thing up. Let's do this on Beverly Explains It All. Hi guys, it's Beverly from Beverly Explains It All. Today I have a fantastic guest. I'm really excited to interview Becca Williams. Becca is an emotions therapist and psychedelic plant medicine guide. Hey Becca.
Hi there, Beverly. Thanks for having me on. I'm just really excited to have this conversation with you.
I am so excited about this. I know a lot of people out there are like, what in the world is a psychedelic plant medicine guide? So I'd love to jump in, but is it okay if we start with just 5 yes/no questions to shake off nerves and, really get to know each other?
Sure. So it's not a pop quiz where it's right or wrong.
No, you can only be right in this. It's all you.
Okay. All right. Fire.
Okay. Do you believe in aliens?
Yeah.
I get a lot of
Can I
yeses.
can I do commentary or is it just a
Yes,
quick answer?
please. No,
Yeah, I
please.
mean, when you go out on a star-studded clear night and look at all of the millions and millions of planets and stars out there, say, hey, we're the only one on our little old planet Earth here. I don't
Okay.
think so.
I'm with you. I'm 100%. I'm like, don't come down and get me or talk to me. But this is like a whole nother episode, but I'm like, I do believe there's like aliens among us. I do feel like I've met a couple, so
Mm.
it's a whole
Mhm.
nother show.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you think dreams are always trying to tell us something?
I think we need to know how to read them, but I do believe that if we are not actively releasing our difficult emotions, that dreams that we're in our subconscious, and the subconscious percolates them up through our dreams and gives them to us. So if we are in a space to recognize and perhaps, meditate on those dreams, I think we can come up with some rich insights.
Ooh, that's a good deep answer. I like
Mm.
that. I'm gonna mesh on that because I'm like, yeah, that subconscious man. Okay, do you believe in second chances?
Always. In fact, my motto is if life is an experiment, you cannot lose. So, an experiment is doing it one way, and if it doesn't work, you're going to do it another way, and then you're going to do it another way, and so forth and so on. So, I
Yeah.
believe there are countless chances.
Oh, I love it. That gives me that gives me hope in life. Just joking. I think all of us. I mean, come on. Do you prefer sunrises or sunsets?
Wow. Simply because, getting up really early to watch a sunset is sometimes a challenge for me. I think I like the ease of sunsets, but I love it all.
I'm with you. It's so hard because like I remember my husband and I, my favorite sunrise, we were in Hawaii, I think Kauai,
Mhm.
and we decided to wake up at like 5 in the morning and we sat on the beach and watched the sunrise over the ocean. And that was like an incredible memory. But at the same time, my mom lives in Peachtree City near Atlanta in Georgia. Those sunsets are out of control, like purple, pink skies. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard
Yeah.
to
And
decide.
I'm over here in Portugal, and we have and Portugal has just miles and miles and miles of coastline. And there are some spectacular, most everyday sunsets and sunrises.
God, don't rub it in, Becca. I'm jealous.
Come on
All right.
over.
Oh, you wait. I promise you. Last question. Do you think everyone has a happy place that they can access in their mind?
I think you need to know how to do it.
Mm.
The answer is yes. And I'm speaking as an emotions therapist. And someone who had labored under crippling anxiety for long time, and kind of lost sight of joy and happiness. But about 10 years ago, and we'll be talking about this, I found what healed me and what I teach. And I do believe absolutely that we can have access to all those good feelings, but we need to be able to gain an emotional resilience in order to move out the unruly emotions, to be there with the good ones. The good ones are always there,
Yeah.
waiting for us to be in touch with them.
That is exactly why you're here, to give us another, tool to be able to access our happy place. So let's just jump into it. Can you please tell my listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I deal with something called emotional liberation, and it's emotional and trauma release. And we use multidisciplinary approaches that engage both the brain, which is Western science, and the intuitive, which hails from yogic science, because Western science is not really crazy or involved in what's going on in our heart, in our deep inner knowing. That's the terrain of the soul. And so I support people in identifying and understanding their reactive patterns that are triggering intense emotions and oftentimes uncontrollable responses. And importantly, the specific triggers that set them off, because we need to raise that awareness of what's going on, what triggers that emotion that comes up, and then what do I do?
Mm.
And so I guide people through a process to diminish and eventually replace those reactions with attitudes and feelings and behaviors that align with their highest intentions or their highest desires.
What exactly is emotional liberation therapy?
So let me just back up a long way. Before I encountered this remarkable process. And that is that I look for a lot of ways to feel better over years and years. I want to just put it on the table that I come from a deeply traumatizing childhood. They call it developmental trauma.
Mm.
And so as a result, I had a lot of, as I mentioned, anxiety and depression and anger, a lot of sadness. And I looked for a lot of ways to feel better, including a lot of therapy and talk therapy. And none of those things really worked for me, maybe slightly, but it never made them go away. And then I encountered emotional liberation more than 10 years ago and met the developer and creator of emotional liberation. His name is GM Khalsa. And he is a longtime Kundalini yoga master. And he created this process for emotional and trauma release that includes learning the emotions, which is really important. We have a palette of 7 difficult emotions, and that's in their families. So fear is one family, and that can be nervousness and fear and anxiety, panic, terror. So that's all fear
That's
and
like the worst one.
anxiety. Yeah, right. It can
I hate that
ratchet
one.
up. Yeah, panic. Panic
The
attacks.
anxiety alone. I'm like,
Yes, exactly. So depression, anger, sadness, and neediness, which is desires that have never, and it's hard for us to believe that desire, that's an emotion. Yes, it is. And it's what we call the mother of all emotions, because you
mm,
need to know what you desire in order to go out and get it. And if every time you see you want something, like a relationship, for instance. I want a respectful, loving, loyal relationship. Oh, but I don't know how to get it. That's a desire that goes unfulfilled. And then we're just kind of bouncing around and getting into toxic relationships and whatnot. But then there's shame and then there's guilt. And so all of those we focus on because all different people have different emotions knocking on their head at any given time. And so what I do is I teach people about emotions because we're all fairly incompetent when we are asked what we feel because we were never trained in this. And so often as children, we were told to be quiet, shut up, unless you're a cute, darling little boy or little girl, then speak up. But we were never allowed to own our anger or our sadness or our depression. And consequently, we did a whole lot of stuffing. And so here we are, adults, and we're just, going out there the best that we can. And we don't have a clue most of the time of what we're feeling. There's a lot of people who come to me and say, meditation never worked for me, the quiet mindfulness meditation, because
it's
my
hard.
Pounding thoughts, it's very hard. And for me too, I studied Buddhism and the mystical form of Judaism and various other meditative approaches that were mindfulness based, where you're quiet, and they just never really worked for me. Some of my students have called it the unmeditation meditation, a neural workout, because that is what it is. We get going, we're sitting, but we may have a mudra, which is a hand position that aligns with the brain and the nervous system. This is straight out of yogic science. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then we will do a particular breath, a pranayama breath, and there will be movement. And I also importantly invite people. I do a process of inviting people to bring up whatever is knocking loudest on their head in the way of difficult emotions. So this contrasts greatly with what we normally do in meditation, where there will be a visualization, right? And I'm walking along the ocean and it's beautiful and the sky is blue, or I'm in a forest. I could never do that. Because I was so full of these difficult emotions. So we're stirring it up. So we bring it up and we process it and release it. And that feels really good. Now, if you do it once, and I actually have practices on my website, free practices that you can do, and you're going to feel good after one. But when you start doing this regularly, 11 minutes, that's it, 11 minutes a day, or maybe 15 minutes a day, that you start strengthening and conditioning your nervous system. And you start creating new neural networks.
So that's emotional liberation therapy. I know a lot of people are going to be like, okay, but where does this like plant medicine guide part come in? I'm wondering if you do the two together. Do you use the plant therapy with emotional liberation? But this kind of rolls into my next question, because, a lot of people get nervous when they hear microdosing in general. Psilocybin, you had to tell me the correct way to say it because I only know it as magic mushrooms. And, they're even cannabis, weed. People immediately think drugs. Like, I'm not going to microdose drugs. What in the world? So how do you explain to someone who's just worried about that? Like, they're doing drugs and that microdosing is different and actually helpful.
So I have been working with plant medicine for a while. In fact, truth be told, back in college, many, many years ago, I was introduced, this girl from Iowa was introduced to cannabis. At that time it was marijuana, right? We don't
taboo.
In the clinical world, we call it cannabis. And what happened was it made me feel better. The anxiety, it took down the anxiety, and I felt open and lighter. And so I actually started using that. It was my medicine. And I would smoke, a little bit of a joint and feel great. Now, of course, you get high. And back then, I'm 69 years old. So
which we're going to talk about, because you look freaking incredible. I don't know if cannabis is the fountain of youth, you guys, like, look at her skin. This is out of control. But we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, research shows it's anti-aging, by the way, in passing, I will say this. So the problem with the cannabis for me was that when I was no longer under the influence, then the anxiety would come back. So it was palliative but transitory. And so when I encountered this work in 2014, emotional liberation, I studied with a GM actually for 4 years. But the first year I started doing this, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to include a little bit of cannabis with this. And I have to tell you, I was on track with, there were 12 others in the online course. And I could see where I was really moving through this work very quickly and and healing a lot. And I always kept GM on top of this. And he'd say, well, that's your thing, Becca. You do that if you want, and you teach that if you want, but that's not my thing.
Gotcha.
I don't work with the substances.
Okay.
Since then, he's asked a lot of questions and looked into it with me. He's very
He's like,
open.
respect, but you're going to the right. Okay.
Yeah. I started introducing also psilocybin microdosing. So it's just very little amounts of psilocybin where you don't get high, but it's a heart opener. It can make you feel more lighter, more in touch with your emotions. Sometimes you can get very sensitive around that. And that coupled with my emotional liberation work, what just blew it out of the water. Now, I want to be clear that what's most important here is my container, my emotional liberation container. And so taking a little bit of cannabis, perhaps the judicious use, I say 1 or 2 tokes. It depends on the ratio. I like twice as much CBD as THC, but I help people when I work with them to find their sweet spot, as we call it. I had a woman just contact me today and said, well, what about edibles? And how do I manage edibles? And, you need to really experiment with this. You need to go in low and go slow. And I say, stay low. Because importantly, this is not about getting high or hallucinating. It's about opening up to the work that we're doing. And I always do this talk when I teach, is that you do not want, if you take too much, so let's talk about cannabis, if you take too much, you're going to numb all out and you're going to lose the opportunity to get the benefit from that session.
I mean, that kind of touches on one of the things I wanted to ask you, because, you talk about microdosing and macrodosing. How do you know when someone might need a bigger dose, or like, just how does that fit into the whole plan?
Yeah, well, it's the clinician in me, and I do like experimentation. And there's no downside with these particular earth plants when we do it carefully. And so, first of all, I just want to say that microdosing cannabis and psilocybin has been shown to enhance the process of neuroplasticity. Now, that's the ability to form and reorganize these synaptic connections in the brain that I was talking about, where the synaptic connections, the ones that are causing the anxiety, can be dried up through this work, and you're creating new ones. So you're developing new patterns of thought and behavior and helping to overcome limiting subconscious beliefs. Now, the macrodose, the journey. So let me just say, I do retreats also over here in Portugal. And so what I do is I teach the emotional liberation approach in knowing your emotions and what they are, because it is really awareness. It's heightening awareness. And so when we do this and be able to go, oh, that's that anxiety coming up. Oh, and then we explore as to why it's there. Why are you here? And then we get the answer from here, not here. We learn because of the practices that we go in, we learn from here. Now, the microdosing really supports that. Now, and so I love microdosing and doing this work because we can still ride that horse. We can control it while we're microdosing a little bit of psilocybin or a little bit of cannabis. Now, when we go into full-on psychedelic journey, we are not in control anymore. Most of the time, people lie down on a mattress and they have a cover on their eyes. We have a playlist, and they're letting the plant have its way with them. And so, by virtue of going in after you've been trained around these emotions, it's not scary. And so much of the time in psychedelic retreat, psychedelic journeys, it's about, and you probably have heard this before, Beverly, it's about set and setting. And the set is what's your mindset going into this, and the setting is the environment. And you need to have those in a really good place for, I believe, for optimal journeys, because there will be difficult things that will come up. But if you're lying there and going, oh yeah, that's the emotions that are moving through. Yeah, okay. And so it's the opportunity for a really productive experience is off the charts in regard to that.
I'm just curious, like, how do you know, like, how would someone know, like, do I take cannabis? Do I take psilocybin? Like, how do you know what's going to work for you? Do you try them both and figure that out?
Well, that's what I teach. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's important to, for instance, I'm teaching a 7-week course coming up actually
Oh,
on
yes.
March 13th for
Please
the
talk
Shift
about that
Network.
some too.
Thank you. And so it's 7 weeks, and the first hour and a half or 2 hour, we have a half an hour of Q&A. The first 90 minutes will be dedicated to what you're asking, the questions that you're asking. What kind, how much, how do I do it? Is it going to be an edible, or should I smoke it, or should I smoke a pipe or have a vape? And so these are all what kind of cannabis, and where do I, what do I do? Well, you want to do a blend. If you can't get a CBD THC blend, then you can buy some CBD and THC and make it a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 or 4-to-1, or you can just do CBD. And the beautiful part about CBD is, as I say, it relaxes the fight or flight response, so that if somebody is prone to anxiety, when they go into this work, that CBD just settles everything down, and we can do our best, our best processing that way.
It's like, I know, like, CBD, it's always in like candles or oils and lotion. So that's the one to like calm me down. But the THC, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the THC is well, they do say that CBD is psychoactive also, but the THC amplifies the difficult emotion or emotions that we want to work with. And I really love that. And let me just say, I have people who come to me and say, oh, I can't do cannabis anymore because I get so anxious.
Mm.
And my very first question is, when you don't do cannabis, do you wrestle with anxiety? And the answer is, I would say categorically, yes, I do wrestle with anxiety. So what happens is, when someone is just doing cannabis willy-nilly, if you will, for relaxation, if the emotion wants to be heard, then it comes up, and the THC amplifies that. So people say, well, I can't be in a group because when I share, in post COVID, we don't be sharing things,
Right.
but in mixed company, but I get so sad or I get so anxious. Well, what is happening is that the cannabis, the plant, is it's a spirit plant, and its role as a spirit plant is telling you that it doesn't want to sit around and shoot the shit with a bunch of people. It wants you to get to work and move this emotion through so that you can feel better. And that's what's beautiful about understanding better why we're feeling the way we're feeling. So when we put it in this silo of spirituality, cannabis and spirituality, that's how we work with it.
That's so interesting. It's like I'm thinking of some friends, not going to incriminate anybody, self included, but like I'm thinking of some friends when, they would go to a party and just be around a bunch of strangers and smoke cannabis and feel super anxious. Like, but I think it's that anxiety that they already had, like all these new people. Who are these people? Like, all those different
Right.
things. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you put it into that container just to make it kind of make sense. I know
Yeah,
a
and
lot.
that's what's happening, right? I mean, I had
Yeah.
somebody say whenever I try to smoke with the groups of people and I go away and I start crying. Well,
Oh
it's the
God.
sadness that wants to be seen and wants to be processed.
I think it's interesting. I have friends who, if they do that, they smoke cannabis that they want to get to work or they're like busybodies, cleaning, can't stay still. And is that because of the type of cannabis that they're smoking, or is that just like
Sure, it
another
can, yeah,
attribute?
sure. No, sure. It can be. It used to be talked about in terms of sativa and indica, where sativa is uplifting, more, what do I want to say,
Like
energizing,
mood
whereas indica
enhancing?
is the kind of thing that you'd want to do before you go to bed, or you want to, they used to call it indica couch. That's how you remember indica couch. But what we know now is that the cultivars have been so mixed and bastardized, if you will, that sativa oftentimes acts like indica and indica like sativa. So it's pretty hard. What they're talking about now is reading the terpenes, but that's a whole nother science deal and what terpenes do. Mm.
Mm. You're like, that's the advanced version of everything.
Yes, yes.
I know everyone out here is dying to know. People, who've never done it. And you talk about it, just this being like an emotion potion, and you use all these cool things like ancient healing and earth medicines. What do people actually feel like for the first time trying it out? And, what should someone expect when they're trying it out for the first time?
Ah, so all you have to do is go to my website and look at some of the testimonials. But for the free practices that I offer, there's some quotes there of people who've done it for the first time, and on my YouTube channel also. But it's like it's such a relief because it's not fun bringing these up, but it's the, as I say, the most efficient and effective way to do it, to move these emotions through.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, you're stirring it up, and maybe you have this sadness and it's coming up and you're realizing what it's connected to, and you're being there with it, and you're asking it to come up so that you can let it go. And after you let it go, Beverly, it's just it's really special. And so people land in a very good place after doing these practices and knowing what they're feeling and why they're feeling it.
And like, are these feelings like, this is probably a dumb question, but like, do they come back? Because, most feelings of like, I don't know, anxiousness or trauma or whatever, they'll pop in every so often. Like, does microdosing help them to like completely go away? Or do you need to constantly microdose to achieve that feeling of peace?
Well, that's a really important question. And you know as well as I do that there's no such thing as a dumb question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I thought you were going to say as a quick fix. I was like, do we just smoke cannabis every day so we never feel bad? That's what I wanted to answer.
So we all have trauma to, there's what do I want to say, a spectrum of trauma to a lesser or greater degree. And so we carry this trauma around. Research shows that it's embedded in our body, in our nervous system, in our tissues. And from yogic science perspective, it's embedded energetically too, in the energetic body, emotional body, the various bodies. And how do we get to it? So when for myself, coming from a deeply traumatizing background, I had a lot of layers of trauma to move. And so when we start doing this work, I like to think of it in terms of layers. So once what I like to assure people is that when they've moved through a particular piece and let it go, they will not have to deal with that layer again. Now, having said that, someone who has a lot less trauma will move through it very quickly over a period of time and feel better.
Wow. That's incredible, that alone just makes it be like, why not give it a try? Because I'm like, that's, I mean, if you've done like the talk therapy and that doesn't work, I mean, it's just another tool in your toolbox of becoming, living your best life and becoming a happier person, I think. Here's an interesting question. All right. If someone has a psychedelic experience that just didn't go as planned, how do you help them make sense of that and turn it into something positive?
Yeah. So what I have found, I do a client intake, and so many people are looking for answers and have really upturned a lot of rocks looking for answers. And of course, psychedelics is there. We have so much talk about it, to try it. And I have to tell you that so many people have said to me, yeah, I did psychedelics, and it either I had a terrible time or it didn't do anything. And what we know now, even with ketamine or MDMA and psilocybin, LSD, whatever, what happens is that they might start feeling better. So remember that these psychedelics, they have their way with you, right? You lay down and then they do their thing. And what happens is you might feel better after it's done, but in what they're seeing now, what the research looks is it differs from person to person, but 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, all that stuff starts coming back. And so then they have to continue again. They have to go find another psychedelic retreat or do another psychedelic, whatever. That is not what I want for my people. And that's why I want them to be familiar and practice emotional liberation with the various emotions and understand that, and then go into the psychedelic journey. I used to get super anxious about airports. There's so many variables, and it just, I was crazy.
For
And
sure.
so I was standing on this people mover with my carry-on, and I was standing there and I looked around, I was like, oh my God, I'm not anxious. Oh my God. And I just started crying, Beverly. I just was there standing on this people mover with my things hanging off my body and just weeping for gratitude. It was a spectacular moment, and one that is emblazoned in my mind for the rest of my life.
Oh my God,
It's a
there's so
sweet
much
moment.
right there. It's like, 'cause I feel like everybody gets some level of anxiety just going to the airport. My dad and my husband, oh my gosh, like my father, when he was alive, we'd have to be there like almost like 4 hours ahead of time. My husband's the same way. And like we'd constantly get in fights. So I'm like, okay, babe, you're gonna have to listen to this episode because this might be for you. And a lot of people take, just different medications like Valium and lorazepam and things like that just to settle their nerves and their calm. I wonder if microdosing might be another tool that they could use instead of those other actual pills.
Well, I love microdosing in this respect, that unlike cannabis, where depending on your ratio, if it's CBD, it's not an issue, but the THC can linger and people feel, they like feel high. And that's not something they want to feel. That's where the microdosing psilocybin comes in.
Like I get it, and it's interesting that you were bringing up the psilocybin and the I keep wanting to say weed, the cannabis. I'm trying to be more professional here.
You can do that. That's fine. Lots of people,
So
lots of
okay,
people call it weed.
let's
Yeah.
break it down for like the people who just say the slang of it all. Like, what really is the difference between microdosing weed and microdosing mushrooms? Because I know a lot of people who are, nervous about either. Like if you say, oh, well, it's just cannabis, cannabis is more public these days. It's legalized in a lot of states, California, where I am. I see people walking down the street smoking a joint. You're probably not supposed to do that, but I see it, whatever. It's just become like a part of our culture now. So it's very accepted. It's not as taboo. But now when you go to psilocybins or magic mushrooms, it's like, dude, you're doing drugs. Like, wait a minute. So like, what's the difference between the two? And like, how can people not think of mushrooms as being like so scary? Because they say weed is like the gateway drug. So if you say, well, I'm trying mushrooms, like how do you make this make sense for people?
The microdosing psilocybin is much more subtle because people aren't smelling it, and you don't have people don't see you doing things with it. It's more like a capsules that you take. I have them professionally capsulized. I like that because each one has a particular milligram in it. And I like to see people find their, as we say, sweet spot. So they're not getting too high or there's not enough. But the big difference, the way I see it, Beverly, is that both plants really work well.
Mm-hmm.
And from my own experience, what I found, because of the layers of trauma that I carried, and some of them were very, very deep, I started trying the psilocybin microdosing because I always experiment on me. I'm my favorite guinea pig before I offer anything to anybody.
You're like, I didn't die. It's okay.
Hardly, it's one
Right.
of the safest substances of any substance, actually.
I mean, clearly you're thriving, you're glowing. So obviously something's working.
Thank you. So what I found was the microdosing for people who have had extremely deep trauma. It gets into, again, from a yogic science perspective, that, the deep layers of trauma energetically in the energetic body, and allows them to come up. So, when we talk about a spirit plant, we are connecting with the soul. And I don't want to let this go out lightly, because when we talk about this work, what we find is that these difficult emotions are, I like to explain it as tethered to our trauma. The reason why we have these unruly emotions, so for instance, crippling anxiety, is because there was something traumatic that occurred that caused that. And so the emotions that are tethered to trauma, we're moving those up and letting them go along with the trauma. Now, where was I going with that? I forgot what I was talking about.
Spiritual ally, like
a spiritual ally. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so because of that, what GM Khalsa, the creator and developer of emotional liberation, discovered is that our unruly emotions are a connection, are a bridge to our soul. And when we can take that thread and pull it with the difficult emotions and get to our soul, then everything opens up and we are able to heal in a big way.
That's really interesting. I mean, I just thought of something I wanted to bring up to you earlier. I mean, obviously you have to have the right coach for this kind of microdosing to really know, what your dosage is. I like that you said that with psilocybin, it actually comes in capsules because I'm once again not incriminating anybody, but somebody might have seen mushrooms and chocolate during college parties and things like that, which is like you don't know what dose you're taking or how much or what's going to happen. So this sounds much more like professional and, like a guided thing. But you did bring up ketamine. And I know that other people, like out here in California, there's all sorts of therapies. Ketamine therapy has become a big one that I've been hearing about. And as everybody knows, Matthew Perry, our beloved friend from Friends, passed away from ketamine. And I know this is not necessarily your expertise because you specialize more in the psilocybin and cannabis. But I'm just wondering with those people who do go ahead and do like ketamine therapies or LSD and things like that you touched on, how do people, like even working with a guide, because you do have to kind of try and see, like you said, your sweet spot, how do you know and when do you know where not to go too far because it can fall into an addiction? And also with that question, how can people become addicted to cannabis? Can they become addicted to psilocybin? Sorry, that was like a mouthful.
So let's take the ketamine first. And it's not in my wheelhouse, so I can't really speak to it in any kind of really deeply informed way. And so maybe I should leave that there.
Gotcha.
But what I do know about ketamine and MDMA, as I said, that people go through these courses of them and pay big money, thousands and thousands of dollars. And then they feel better, particularly depression, treatment-resistant depression, that people feel better, but they only feel better for, 6 to 8 weeks, and then they have to go back in again. Now that's okay if you have more money than God, or you're just able to continue to pay it out.
Matthew
But
Perry money.
yeah, I'm looking for permanent healing, or Musk, or Elon Musk.
Yeah, right.
He's said to be addicted to ketamine as well.
Not so
So that's
over there.
That's over there, yeah. But what I do like are the earth medicines, which they come from they're plants, right? So I really like that.
And that's the real difference too. Like these are plant medicines,
yeah,
organic.
I like organic. I always get my cannabis from an organic grower who grows organically and loves the plants and talks to them, and and the mushrooms as well. It's very hard. That's the big deal about psychedelics. It's very hard to get addicted. I mean, like ketamine, you get addicted to that feeling, so you can become addicted to it. But LSD, psilocybin, the others, it's very hard, because I love for psilocybin, which is my medicine, is that you gain a tolerance. So importantly, you can't do it too often, because then if you do it, then you start gaining a tolerance, and you don't get any sort of response from the plant. Now cannabis, now cannabis, people contact me and say, I really want to reimagine my relationship with her, because right now it's hard for me. I always used to love her, and I got high for a long time, and now I can't, because I get anxiety. Right. And okay, so when you're not high, are you anxious? Oh yeah, I get anxious. Okay, it's time. The cannabis is telling you it's time to do this work. Now, the other piece, though, is that, cannabis is different than it was 10 years ago. I mean, the cultivars, they just keep ratcheting up the percentage of THC in it. So you got to be really careful. I have colleagues who say, instead of smoking a whole joint, for instance, you just take a hit, you just take a hit, and then that does it. So they kind of moderate the explanation of that. But if this is a longer conversation, Beverly, but let me just say that cannabis meets you where you need to be. So if you want to numb, if your life is miserable and you want to numb and play video games, then that's what she's going to do. She's going to numb you. She's just going to be like, wrap you in this loving cocoon until you are ready to come out of it. And cannabis is the least of the worst as far as numbing. Mostly, alcohol is awful. Alcohol is awful. Prescription drugs are awful. I mean, if you're addicted to them, there is a place for prescription drugs, absolutely, and mood enhancers or mood modulators. But when we're ready to come out, she can play a different role for you. And that is helping you be in touch with your emotions so that you can heal.
Wow, that's really interesting. I'd love to hear a little bit about just how you've healed from your own trauma with this method. And I want to know, what was your biggest moment for you when you realized that, hey, this stuff really works?
Well, that big moment one of them was at the airport on the people mover. It's because the anxiety was the big deal. I mean, I want to say social anxiety, but I had anxiety across the board. But particularly when I walked in, it was really, I was raised in an environment where I was rejected. That, don't get into, we don't have the time or the breath to get into a big long song and dance about my psychological analysis of myself. But I wasn't wanted. And so that was communicated to me in every way possible. And so for me, rejection was a huge piece. And so if I got into a situation where I felt I could be rejected, then the anxiety would ratchet up. So for me to be able to walk into a gathering and not be on high alert for being rejected, right? That was huge.
I want to
say, as human beings, we are always trying to avoid rejection and gain acceptance, avoid rejection and gain acceptance. And life is a series of acceptance and rejection, acceptance and rejection. And when we can heal that anxiety, I like to say to my students that if we can accept that sometimes we're brilliant and sometimes we're an idiot, so sometimes I just say the wrong thing, or it's like, well, that was stupid. Or sometimes I'm just brilliant, and I can accept each one equally. So I'll walk away from something and go, well, that was kind of an idiot move. Okay.
Whoops.
Well, or
that's the best feeling.
So I don't have to be brilliant all the time, right? I don't have to. And it's like, oh, well, that was pretty good. That's a great idea, Beck. But it's just this, and it's
your balance.
It's a balance.
Yeah. I mean, so you personally, you do cannabis and psilocybin.
Yeah, yes, I do. Yeah, I am so, what do I want to say? I'm so healed, actualized, that I really don't need, I don't need them. I do maintain my practice, and I will do some CBD, just, to heighten this, but I just so seldom am triggered anymore that I don't need that. But it's important. I mean, I think it's an important medicine.
In those moments that you do need it or feel that you need it, do you know hey, I need cannabis in this instance, or hey, I need a psilocybin in this instance?
It's really about emotional liberation container. It's about the practices. You know what? So that rejection is the last thing to go for me. It goes deep, deep, deep. That sense of rejection. And so if I'm in a situation where I do feel some anxiety and I immediately go, oh, that's connected to the rejection that I'm feeling because of thus and such, I need to get back to center, and I need a practice. And so, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but on my website, I do have free practices that anybody can do. And I do them along with you, which is really important for a lot of people in getting feedback. So I do a practice, and I'm back. I'm back, baby.
You're back. On these practices on your website, now people should be microdosing while doing them, or?
So what I like as a clinician, I like to set a baseline first. So if somebody could just do the practice first without anything, because they'll likely get a big response out of it and go, wow.
And
so they know.
Work?
Well, it's movements, it's breath work. Sometimes it's mantras. So a mantra is, a sound or tone that's very soothing. And so after they're done, they'll say, well, okay, that's how I felt. That felt good. Now I'm going to try it with a little cannabis next time I do it, and then see how that goes.
I love that they're offered for free, because I mean, a lot of listeners out there, you guys know you're already doing cannabis anyway. Hop into her website so you can see if you can get in touch with that, those emotions that we're all just stuffing down in ourselves. The last couple of questions. I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier. You're 69, which I want to scream. I had no idea. You look freaking fantastic. If you're telling people that cannabis or psilocybin is just going to keep you looking youthful like that, I think everyone's going to go out and try to jump on your website right now and get this magic potion. Can you speak a little bit on, I don't know, do these psychedelics, or are they called psychedelics? Do they help you kind of maintain youth?
Yeah. So first of all, the emotion potion, I don't sell anything. I teach and guide my, so I have a service, right? I have a practice, but I just want to clear up that the emotion potion, I don't sell anything.
Yeah, it's not a real thing. It's not pills. There's no cap there.
Yeah.
But you can you help them guide to figure out what they need.
Yes. And I'm in Portugal, so it's if you're in America, then you need to, and I have a couple of resources where you can go that very easy. I mean, yeah, psilocybin for one if you needed to go somewhere to purchase capsules. What was the question? Next
Just,
question.
I was like, we'll put that link, psilocybin and everything in the show notes. But
Sure.
no, just the fountain of youth. How do you stay so youthful
Oh,
at 69? Like, it's incredible. Like you were telling me a little bit about a course that you have, or like the daily thing that you were about to do on your blog.
Oh yeah. Well, so I'm aging. There's no doubt about it. In fact, as we were discussing, I started I started a series for 2025, and it's called 69 and Counting. It's my journey of self-shaming. I come from a background of being in television news. So as a woman in television news, it was all about your looks, right? And so I had an impetus on my looks as I moved through my 20s and 30s and 40s, and it's a hard thing to shake, and it's actually very subconscious. And so I realized that there's a lot of things that I'm concerned about. It's really not about the substances, although they're supporting. It's really about not laboring under difficult emotions anymore.
Yeah.
The stress, the burden of carrying these emotions every day and worrying at the slightest pin drop, anger. Maybe we have toxic relationships that we're involved in. And that's another thing, when we start experimenting and going inward and finding out what we truly need, we need to have the outside align with the inside. And so that's why the substances are so valuable, especially at this point, because the effectiveness, the efficiency, really, those substances really support us in moving through this. Oftentimes it could be the dark night of the soul.
Wow. And just helping you live your best life. They're helping guide you there. I mean, one more thing, like I'm just so in awe that you're in Portugal. I've been hearing so much about Portugal. It keeps coming up, so I'm like, maybe that's a sign for me. It's a huge move. How has that changed your work? Or like how do people react to it? Are the Portuguese more accepting when it comes to microdosing, do you feel? I mean, Europeans.
Yeah, Europeans. Let me see. Well, so Portugal has adopted a unique approach to managing drug use, and it's a standout from the policies of many other countries in Europe as well as the United States. And so Portugal decriminalized the possession and consumption of all drugs for personal use.
Oh,
And so this means that the personal use of substances isn't illegal, but it operates in an undefined regulatory space. So I'm more free with my work over here with the psilocybin and the cannabis, actually. And as far as response, I speak English, and so I cater to an English-speaking community, whether they're from UK or Germany, or I mean, you have to speak English in order to work with me. You have to understand. So I would say, how has it changed? Is that it's really enlarged my community, because it was American based, but now I'm over here in Europe, and I have all of Europe as well as my community in the United States.
yeah. Like they come out and seek and find you because you're an English speaker in Portugal. So that's really interesting. Wow. Well, okay. Is there any one last like thing you'd like to impart on my audience before we get into offers and things like that? Anybody, like maybe someone's on the fence? Is there any kind of encouragement or just anything you would like to say about it?
Yeah, yeah, you can feel better. I just want you to know that as many rocks as you've lifted up and looked under, as many things as you have done, and feeling like you're at the end of your rope as far as feeling better, you can feel better. You can. And I am here to tell you that.
So everybody, you hear it here, you're not alone. This is a tool, just another tool in your arsenal to help you live your best life. Becca, I know people are really curious out there. There's so much more to read. Can you please tell us all of your offers, your website, your coaching? Like, I'm really excited to hear more about the 3-day retreat in Portugal. So
Sure.
listeners, listen up.
Sure. Well, and it's so wonderful that we'll be able to talk about this, and then when people hear it, they'll be able to do it. It's
Yes, right on
thank you,
time.
Beverly, for your timing on this.
There you
So
go. I
first of
got you.
all, you got me, baby. First of all, everything I'm saying can be found at my website, and it's so easy to find. It's beccawilliams.org. beccawilliams.org. And I could go into the big song and dance about my social media, but you know what? Social media has not been kind to me because I work with plant medicine, and social
Mm,
media suits,
taboo.
it is taboo, right? And
Mm.
even though I am on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, it's YouTube most recently has bottlenecked me because of, and it's educational. Everything I
Shocked.
do is educational, but
Yeah,
as
I'm
long as
pretty
it's
shocked.
cannabis or psychedelics,
It's like that's how
they
we
say that.
know there's still a lot of unaccepting and judgmental people out there.
Oh my gosh. And so they shadow banned where I was getting hundreds of subscribers per month. I get like 2 or 3 subscribers a month now. Anyway, go to my website.
The
It's
website,
all
guys, the
there.
website.
But most recently, starting March 13th, the Shift Network has invited me to teach a 7-week course called The Power of Cannabis for Emotional Freedom. Therapeutic practices rooted in yogic wisdom that transform difficult emotions into power and peace. It's a mouthful, but I know that you will have a link in the
Oh
show
yeah.
notes so people can go there and take a look. Before you, I'm not saying go there and register right now and do this, but go ahead and take a look and see if it resonates. And I know that you had mentioned in regard to the retreat. So we have 2 retreats coming up in May at a beautiful villa here in southern Portugal, right in my own backyard. And
Oof.
we're doing 3 days, and it's 2 nights and 3 days. So we have a microdosing journey, and we have a full-on psilocybin psychedelic journey, and then integration too in this really special villa that's not far from me here in Lagos, Portugal. So there is that. We'll be doing the emotional liberation process, and you can find that on my website as well. Let's see what else. The list of practices are on my website, and I can actually give you the particular link for that,
Yes,
so you don't
please.
have to dig through my website to find that. That's the freebie. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. We like freebies over here. I love that trip to Portugal idea. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you could go learn about microdosing, get your emotional liberation, get all that, stuck feelings out, all those emotions that you've suppressed and have pressed down, drinking away, whatever you do, get those out, cry it out, and then spend that rest of that vacation in Europe and in Portugal and just feeling refreshed and loving life. And
That's the
I think,
intention. Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, that's the dream right there. And then the 7 weeks with the Shift Network, I think that's important work as well, because it sounds like it's kind of the foundation of really understanding what microdosing is all about and just the roots of where you can go with plant medicine.
Well said.
Man. Okay, well, I would love to hear if you could close us out with a mantra, a quote, or words that you live by.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I am moving toward an enduring inner stability where nothing disturbs my inner peace.
Mm.
I am moving toward an enduring inner stability where nothing disturbs my inner peace. And that might be an intent right now, but it is an intent. It's an intention, and you're moving toward that. So that's an important piece.
That's beautiful. That's something that everyone can just kind of like say to themselves throughout the day. Like even just now when I closed my eyes and thought it, I love to, set an intention that just made me feel at peace. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Becca, this has been a wonderful interview. I definitely want to
Mhm.
have you back in the future just to dive in a little more. I think a lot of people are going to have questions, so feel free to slide into my DMs, you guys, if there's anything you want to know more about Becca, or feel free to go straight to her website. But I appreciate you for coming on and letting us know about plant medicine and
Oh,
emotional
Beverly, thank you so
therapy.
much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Beverly Explains It All.
That's right, y'all.
With the help of others.
With the help. I needed it. So thank you so much for coming, and everybody have a wonderful day.